The mission statement for a carrier strike group escort destroyer contained 9 words that define the entire operational calculus. Protect the strike group from airborne and surface threats. 9 words. The operational calculus they produced was clean, well-defined, and had been refined across 70 years of carrier aviation doctrine. The destroyer knew where the carrier was. The destroyer knew what it was protecting. The geometry of the defensive envelope had a single center point. The mission statement for a multinational convoy escort contained a different geometry entirely, and the difference was not in the words, but in the math that followed from them. The destroyer is operating in the Red Sea, 160 nautical miles northwest of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, as the sole dedicated naval escort for a 6-vessel, multinational, humanitarian logistics convoy. The convoy consists of 6 merchant vessels, a bulk carrier, 2 container ships, a roll-on, roll-off vessel, and 2 tankers, spread across a 14 nautical mile formation at staggered intervals and varying speeds. The fastest vessel in the convoy makes 16 knots. The slowest makes 11 knots. Convoy formation has a total footprint of approximately 280 square kilometers of ocean. The destroyer occupies the threat-facing position at the convoy's northern flank, running parallel to the formation at 18 knots, coordinating with the convoy commodore on the lead container ship via VHF radio. The convoy commodore has no weapons. The convoy commodore has crew members. The convoy commodore has 340,000 metric tons of humanitarian supplies destined for the port of Aden. At 11:22 a.m., the SPY-6 radar resolved 60 contacts, bearing 015 to 055, range 74 to 81 kilometers, altitude 400 to 600 meters, speed 190 kilometers per hour. One-way attack UAV platforms, Shahid 136 profile, small radar cross-section, GPS and terminal electro-optical guidance. In 3 loose groups, Group A, 22 contacts on the northern arc bearing 015 to 025, Group B, 20 contacts on the central arc bearing 030 to 040, Group C, 18 contacts on the southern arc bearing 045 to 055. The fire control system generated the engagement solution in 0.8 seconds. The TAO read it and recognized immediately that the engagement solution answered the wrong question. The fire control system had computed the optimal interceptor allocation to defend the destroyer. It had not been asked to defend 6 vessels spread across 280 square kilometers of ocean. It had generated a solution centered on the ship's own defensive envelope. CIWS range, ESSM range, SM2 and SM6 range, all computed as concentric circles around the destroyer's hull. Group A's 22 contacts on bearing 015 to 025 were converging on the destroyer's position within standard doctrine. Intercept recommended SM6 and SM2 at outer ring, ESSM at middle ring, CIWS terminal. Group B's 20 contacts on bearing 030 to 040 were converging on a point approximately 9 nautical miles south of the destroyer's current position. That point corresponded to the current location of the bulk carrier, the largest vessel in the convoy, the most identifiable on radar, the slowest at 11 knots, currently at the center of the formation and 9 nautical miles away from the destroyer's protective arc. Group C's 18 contacts on bearing 045 to 055 were converging on a point approximately 14 nautical miles south-southeast of the destroyer's position. That point corresponded to the current location of the 2 tankers forming the convoy's trailing element. 60 contacts, 22 targeting the destroyer, 38 targeting convoy vessels that were 9 to 14 nautical miles from the ship's own defensive envelope. The Fire Control System's engagement recommendation covered the 22 contacts targeting the destroyer and flagged the remaining 38 as outside the ship's current weapons arc coverage. Not because the weapons couldn't reach them. The SM-6 at 150-kilometer range could engage contacts over any of the convoy vessels with ease. But the Fire Control System's default allocation logic prioritized threats to the ship. The other 38 were labeled outside defensive coverage, recommend position change. The position change that would bring Group B and Group C into the ship's defensive arcs required the destroyer to move 9 to 12 nautical miles south toward the convoy vessels being targeted. Moving toward the convoy brought those 38 contacts into the defensive envelope. It also moved the destroyer away from its current position, covering the 22 contacts in Group A, which would continue closing on their approach track toward the bulk carrier and the container ships in the convoy's northern element, while the destroyer transited south. This was the geometry the Adversary had designed. Not a swarm against the destroyer, a swarm against the convoy, with the destroyer forced to choose which portion of the convoy it could cover with its weapons arc and which portion it could not. The ship was one point. The convoy was an area. The Adversary had sent threats to multiple points in that area simultaneously, creating a coverage problem no single defensive platform could fully solve. The TAO had 11 minutes before the first contacts crossed into SM-6 engagement range against any portion of the convoy. He had 11 minutes to make a decision that the doctrine did not specifically address, because the doctrine assumed the defended asset was either the ship itself or a single fixed point. It did not have a procedure for 6 independently maneuvering vessels spread across 280 square kilometers. Convoy Commodore. This is Escort. All convoy vessels. Emergency course change to bearing 330, maximum speed, close the formation. I need everyone as tight as possible in the shortest time available. How fast can the bulk carrier make 14 knots? The Convoy Commodore's response. The bulk carrier could make 13 knots maximum in its current load state. The 2 tankers could make 14 knots. The container ships could make 16 knots. If all vessels turned to bearing 330 now, the formation spread would contract from 280 square kilometers to approximately 140 square kilometers in 18 minutes. 1 minute after the first contacts entered SM-6 engagement range. 1 minute too slow. But the bearing 330 turn also changed the threat geometry. The contacts in Groups B and C were computing approach vectors to the convoy vessel's current positions. A course change of 75 degrees would shift the intercept solution for every contact in Groups B and C. Not eliminate it. The GPS guidance would update, but it would introduce a recalculation lag and a new approach angle that potentially brought more contacts into the destroyer's weapons arc. All convoy vessels execute immediately. Maximum speed bearing 330, running count, 11:24 a.m., second 122, 60 UAV contacts. Group A, 22 contacts bearing 015 to 025, targeting destroyer adjacent zone. Group B, 20 contacts bearing 030 to 040, targeting bulk carrier at 9 nautical miles. Group C, 18 contacts bearing 045 to 055, targeting tankers at 14 nautical miles. Convoy, executing course change to 330, speed maximum. SM-6 8, SM-2 24, ESSM 32, RAM 21, CIWS 100%. Time to first SM-6 engagement window 9 minutes. Formation spread contracting. The course change produced its first effect at 11:27 a.m. when the lead tanker, now at 14 knots on bearing 330, had shifted its position enough that the Group C contact's approach vectors were now crossing 12 nautical miles from the destroyer's projected position rather than 14, still outside direct CIWS coverage. But now inside SM2 extended engagement geometry if the destroyer itself altered course 4 degrees south. The destroyer turned to bearing 100-74 at 11:27 a.m., a 4 degrees southward adjustment that brought Group C's projected contact intercept points within SM2 range while keeping Group A contacts in SM6 outer ring geometry. A compromise position, not optimal for any single threat, the least bad position for all three simultaneously. At 11:31 a.m., the first contacts entered SM6 engagement range. Not the contacts targeting the destroyer. Group A was still at 68 kilometers closing. The contacts that entered SM6 range first were Group B's 20 platforms targeting the bulk carrier, now at 59 kilometers slant range from the destroyer after the convoy course change, which had compressed Group B's approach geometry. SM6, 8 contacts from Group B. Fire. SM6 cells, 1 through 4. 4 launches in 1.6 seconds against 4 Group B contacts at 58 to 61 kilometers. The 4 with the most direct vectors toward the bulk carrier. The SM6 tracked northeast, not north. The crew on the bulk carrier, 8 nautical miles south of the destroyer, could not see the launches, but would hear the impact assessments. 3 intercepts. 1 miss. The contact had descended from 400 to 120 meters altitude between the SM6 launch and terminal engagement. The basket placement offset by the altitude change. 1 Group B contact surviving at 51 kilometers, closing on the bulk carrier's bearing. SM6 cells 5 and 6 against 2 more Group B contacts at 56 kilometers. 2 intercepts. SM6 cells 7 and 8. The 2 remaining SM6 cells. The weapons officer paused for 0.4 seconds before the authorization, which was as close to hesitation as the engagement allowed. Using the last 2 SM6 on Group B contacts meant 0 SM6 remaining for the 22 Group A contacts that were closing on the northern convoy element. Group A would need to be handled entirely by SM2 and ESSM. Last 2 SM6. Group B. Fire. 2 intercepts. SM6 inventory, 0. Group B contacts remaining, 13 at 42 to 49 kilometers. Running count. 11:33 a.m., second 671, SM6, 0. Group A, 22 contacts at 41 kilometers. Group B, 13 contacts at 42 to 49 kilometers. Group C, 18 contacts at 52 kilometers. Bulk carrier bearing 9.2 nautical miles. Formation spread, 190 square kilometers contracting. SM2, 24. ESSM, 32. RAM 21, CIWS 100%, cost $16.8 million. Time elapsed 11 minutes. The SM2 engagement required the TAO to sequence across 3 simultaneous threat groups at 3 different range bands on 3 different bearings, with the fire control radar needing to assign illuminator channels to each engagement. The SPY-6 had sufficient illuminator capacity for simultaneous SM2 engagements across multiple bearings. This was exactly what the Aegis system was designed to manage. The limitation was not the radar. The limitation was arithmetic. 24 SM2 cells. 3 groups totaling 53 surviving contacts. At 75% SM2 hit probability, 24 rounds neutralized 18 contacts. 35 contacts surviving into ESSM range. Against 32 ESSM cells at 82% hit probability, 26 contacts neutralized. 9 surviving to CIWS range. Against 2 CIWS mounts at standard engagement tempo. 9 contacts was at the edge of CIWS capacity if they arrived sequentially, and beyond capacity if they arrived across multiple simultaneous bearings with the convoy spread across the defensive arc. The math did not close by a margin of approximately 2 to 4 contacts, depending on hit rates and sequencing. 2 to 4 contacts reaching the convoy vessels, not the destroyer but the merchants, with 40-kilogram warhead platforms at terminal approach. The bulk carrier had no countermeasures, no CIWS, no radar system capable of tracking an incoming platform, no ability to maneuver at the speed required to complicate a GPS-guided approach. It had a crew and 340,000 metric tons of humanitarian supplies and a maximum speed of 13 knots. SM2 cells 1 through 8 against 8. Group A contacts at 38 to 42 kilometers, the contacts converging on the convoy's northern container ships. 6 intercepts, 2 misses. Group A, 14 remaining at 33 to 37 kilometers. SM2 cells 9 through 16 against 8. Group B contacts at 34 to 38 kilometers, split between the contacts targeting the bulk carrier and those targeting the center of the formation. 5 intercepts, 3 misses. Group B, 8 remaining at 28 to 33 kilometers. SM2 cells, 17 through 24. The final 8, SM2 against the highest priority surviving contacts from Group A and Group B combined. 8 launches, 6 intercepts, 2 misses. SM2 inventory, 0. Group A, 8 contacts remaining. Group B, 5 contacts remaining. Group C, still 18 contacts at 38 kilometers, entirely unengaged by SM2 because the SM2 inventory had been consumed on Group A and Group B. Running count, 11:37 a.m., second 902, SM6, 0, SM2, 0. Group A, 8 contacts, 22 kilometers. Group B, 5 contacts, 18 kilometers. Group C, 18 contacts, 38 kilometers. Bulk carrier, 8.7 nautical miles. ESSM, 32. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost, $46.2 million. Time, 15 minutes. 18 contacts with no outer or middle ring intercept yet. Running count, 11:38 a.m., second 968. SM6, 0. SM2, 0. Group A, 8 contacts, 22 kilometers. Group B, 5 contacts, 19 kilometers. Group C, 18 contacts, 38 kilometers. Bulk carrier, 8.7 nautical miles. Tankers, 7.1 nautical miles. ESSM, 32. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost, $46.2 million. Time, 16 minutes. 31 contacts unengaged by any system. The ESSM engagement priority question was the one the TAO had been preparing to answer since the first contact picture resolved. 32 ESSM cells. 31 surviving contacts across 3 groups. Group C's 18 contacts were the furthest but entirely unmolested. They had faced no SM6 and no SM2. They were intact and closing on the tankers at the convoy's rear. Group A's 8 and Group B's 5 were closer and had already been engaged with some attrition. Against Group A at 22 kilometers with ESSM, 11 contacts neutralized from 16 cells at 85% hit probability, 5 surviving to CIWS. Against Group B at 18 kilometers with ESSM, 4 neutralized from 4 cells, 1 surviving. Against Group C, 16 cells against 18 contacts, 13 neutralized, 5 surviving. Priority by consequence. Group C's tankers were the most vulnerable merchant vessels, carrying fuel, a hit producing secondary effects. Group A's container ships were the most numerous. Group B's bulk carrier was the largest. ESSM, 12 cells on Group C first, then split remaining 20 across Groups A and B by distance. ESSM cells 1 through 12 against the 12 closest Group C contacts at 32 to 36 kilometers, 9 intercepts, 3 misses. Group C, 9 contacts remaining at 26 to 31 kilometers. ESSM cells 13 through 20 against Group A at 17 to 19 kilometers. 6 intercepts, 2 misses. Group A, 2 contacts remaining at 14 to 16 kilometers inside CIWS range. ESSM cells 21 through 24 against Group B at 14 to 17 kilometers. 3 intercepts, 1 miss. Group B, 1 contact remaining at 11 kilometers. ESSM cells 25 through 32. 8 remaining against Group C's 9 surviving contacts at 19 to 23 kilometers. 6 intercepts, 2 misses. Group C, 2 contacts remaining at 14 to 16 kilometers. ESSM inventory, 0. 6 contacts remaining across 3 groups. 2 Group A at 12 kilometers and closing, 1 Group B at 8 kilometers and closing, 2 Group C at 12 kilometers and closing on the tankers. 1 additional Group C contact at 10 kilometers. Running count, 11:40 a.m., second 1111, ESSM 0, SM6 0, SM2 0. Group A, 2 contacts, 12 kilometers. Group B, 1 contact, 8 kilometers. Group C, 3 contacts, 10 to 12 kilometers. RAM 21. CIWS 100%. Cost $60.6 million. Time elapsed 18 minutes. Running count 11:41 a.m. second 1162. ESSM 0. SM6 0. SM2 0. Group A 2 contacts 12 kilometers. Group B 1 contact 8 kilometers. Group C 3 contacts 10 to 12 kilometers. RAM 21. CIWS 100%. Bulk carrier 8.4 nautical miles. Tankers 6.8 nautical miles. Cost $60.6 million. Time 19 minutes. 6 contacts inside 12 kilometers on 3 different bearings targeting 3 different convoy vessels. The destroyer's 2 CIWS mounts had a combined coverage arc sufficient to handle contacts approaching the destroyer and the immediately adjacent convoy vessels. But the formation spread was still 120 square kilometers. The tankers were 8.3 nautical miles from the destroyer, outside CIWS direct engagement geometry. RAM cells 1 through 6 against the 3 Group C contacts, targeting the tankers at 9 to 11 kilometers. 2 intercepts from the first pair, 1 miss. The contact on bearing 052 had descended to 60 meters altitude, and the RAM seeker had tracked it through 2 wave height intervals before losing acquisition inside 7 kilometers. The contact continued on bearing 052 toward the lead tanker at 7 nautical miles. RAM cells 7 and 8 against the surviving Group C contact. 1 intercept. The contact fragmented at 6.4 kilometers. The warhead did not initiate. Structural disintegration was sufficient to disable the guidance and fusing mechanism. Debris scattered across the water surface at 6.4 kilometers from the lead tanker's position. Group C, 3 contacts neutralized by RAM. 0 remaining. The 2 Group A contacts were now inside CIWS forward coverage at 2.8 and 3.3 kilometers. CIWS forward engaged in sequence. First burst, 0.6 seconds, 45 rounds. Contact fragmented at 2,400 meters. Warhead initiated in the fragmentation cloud, a flat crack, overpressure wave reaching the destroyer as a minor hull tremor. Second burst, 0.8 seconds, 60 rounds. Contact fragmented at 2,900 meters. Standard warhead detonation in fragmentation cloud. No hull impact on the destroyer. The two contacts had been targeting the lead container ship, 4.2 nautical miles north of the destroyer. Both had been intercepted well short of their intended target. The Group B contact, the one that had been tracking the bulk carrier on bearing 038, was at 4.1 kilometers from the bulk carrier when the CIWS aft acquired it, at 4.1 kilometers from the tanker. But the CIWS aft's coverage arc on bearing 038 from the destroyer's current position required a 22-degree rotation from its standard aft centerline coverage. Within specifications, but at the edge of optimal engagement geometry, the mount rotating at near maximum traverse rate. Burst, 1.3 seconds, 97 rounds. The contact fragmented at 3,700 meters from the destroyer. The bulk carrier was 4.2 nautical miles away. At 3,700 meters from the destroyer on bearing 038, the debris field was approximately 4.1 kilometers from the bulk carrier's hull. The warhead initiated in the fragmentation cloud at this distance. The overpressure and debris from a 40-kilogram warhead detonation at 4.1 kilometers from an 80,000-ton vessel, non-structural. The bulk carrier reported minor vibration through the hull structure and no damage or injuries. No contact had reached any convoy vessel. The engagement was over. Running count, 11:42 a.m., second 1,214, all 60 contacts, neutralized. 0 contacts reached convoy vessels. Bulk carrier, warhead detonation, 4.1 kilometers off hull, no structural effect. SM6, 0. SM2, 0. ESSM, 0. RAM, 13. CIWS forward, 91%. CIWS aft, 89%. Cost, $64.0 million. Time elapsed, 20 minutes. Running count, 11:43 a.m., second 1,262. All 60 contacts neutralized. 0 reached any convoy vessel. Bulk carrier, warhead detonation, 4.1 kilometers off hull. No structural effect. SM6, 0. SM2, 0. ESSM, 0. RAM, 13. CIWS forward, 91%. CIWS aft, 89%. Cost, $64.0 million. Time, 21 minutes. Convoy, intact, proceeding bearing 330. The convoy commodore called at 11:43 a.m. to confirm the all clear and report the bulk carrier's status. The cargo was intact. The crew was intact. The convoy commodore used the word grateful and the word relieved and asked whether the escort needed anything. The TAO answered the first question. The damage assessment on the destroyer. No structural damage, no hull impacts, no crew effects, all systems fully operational. The magazine assessment read at 11:52 a.m. presented the complete accounting of what 20 minutes of convoy defense had cost. SM6, 0 of 8, SM2, 0 of 24, ESSM, 0 of 32. RAM, 13 of 21 remaining. CIWS forward, 91%. CIWS aft, 89%. 3 complete missile systems fully expended. Every SM6, SM2, and ESSM cell empty. The ship was operating on RAM and CIWS. If another 60 platform engagement occurred in the next 4 days before resupply, the outer ring, the middle ring, and the close-range missile layer were unavailable. The ship had 2 CIWS mounts and 13 RAM rounds as its entire defensive capacity. The supply officer assembled the final accounting at 1,300. 60 Shad 136 one-way attack platforms at $20,000 each, $1.2 million. 3 launch vehicles and crew, $60,000. Mission, planning, and convoy tracking. Estimated $80,000. Total adversary investment, approximately $1.34 million. U.S. munitions expended, 8 SM-6 at $2.1 million to $16.8 million. 24 SM, 2 at $1.2 million to $28.8 million. 32 ESSM at $450,000 to $14.4 million. 8 RAM at $900,000 to $7.2 million. CIWS ammunition, $23,000. Total, $67.2 million. Exchange ratio, 50-1 in the adversary's favor. The ratio was in the standard range for this theater. But the ratio did not capture the structural problem the engagement had revealed. A single destroyer escort for a 6-vessel convoy was not a defensive architecture. It was a defensive point trying to cover a defensive area. Every engagement where the adversary targeted the convoy vessels rather than the escort converted the destroyer from an air defense platform into a triage system, forced to make sequential decisions about which vessels it could protect and which ones were beyond its geometric coverage. The adversary had not targeted the destroyer. Every contact in all 3 groups had been programmed to approach convoy vessels or the zone adjacent to them. The destroyer had spent $67.2 million of interceptors to protect $340,000 worth of humanitarian supplies per trip, or rather, to protect the vessels and crews carrying those supplies, a calculation that had no dollar denominator at all. The TAO documented 3 observations in the after-action record. First, the adversary's tactic of targeting convoy vessels rather than the escort force defensive coverage decisions across a distributed area that no single-ship escort could optimally resolve. The escort had been forced to choose between coverage zones and had managed to cover all 3 through a combination of convoy maneuvering, weapons allocation sequence, and positional adjustments that had, through a margin narrower than was comfortable, prevented any contact from reaching a merchant hull. Second, the convoy course change at first detection had been critical. Without the formation compression, Group B and Group C contacts would have approached the bulk carrier and tankers at 14 to 16 nautical miles from the destroyer rather than 8 to 9 nautical miles. At 16 nautical miles, Group C contacts would have been outside SM-2 extended engagement range from the destroyer's initial position and would have required a significant position change that would have opened the Group A coverage arc. Third, the engagement had succeeded. All 60 contacts had been neutralized. No convoy vessel had been damaged. 6 merchant vessels and their crews were intact and continuing toward Aden with their cargo. By every outcome metric, the mission had been accomplished. None of those 3 observations changed the 4th. The escort was now operating with 0 SM-6, 0 SM-2, and 0 ESSM. The convoy had 3 more days of transit before reaching Aden. The adversary's launch sites were still operational. The adversary now had precise data on the escort's defensive sequencing, the convoy's maneuvering response time, and the approximate magazine depth of a single-ship escort in a 20-minute maximum rate engagement. The information the adversary had purchased for $1.34 million was the knowledge of exactly how to design the next engagement to exceed the escort's demonstrated capacity. Not 60 contacts, 80, not distributed across 3 bearings, staggered to arrive at the CIWS layer simultaneously from arcs the single escort could not cover without relocating. Not targeting the escort, targeting the convoy vessels at ranges that forced the escort into position, compromises before the engagement even began. For $1.34 million, the adversary had conducted a live-fire test of the escort's maximum defensive capacity and identified exactly where its limits were. Emergency resupply transmitted at 12:14 p.m. Full VLS reload plus RAM. ETA to nearest replenishment vessel. 3.5 days. 3.5 days. 2 more escort transits to Aden on the current convoy schedule. The convoy commodore transmitted a brief message at 12:20 p.m. The convoy was proceeding on schedule, and the crew of the bulk carrier wished to express thanks. The TAO acknowledged. He did not mention the magazine status. The convoy commodore did not need to know the margin by which the engagement had succeeded. The margin was not the point. The supplies reaching Aden was the point. The magazine was empty. The supplies were en route. Both of those facts would determine what happened next.